Hello, welcome to the Celebrity Crime File. Today, we're taking a closer look at one of hip-hop's most enduring rivalries, the decades-long feud between Sean Diddy Combs and Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. Two moguls, two massive personalities, and one explosive history that's taken a criminal turn.
It's wild how it's evolved. What started as a low-key tension in the industry has turned into something way bigger. We're talking about courtrooms, federal investigations, and deep personal history. And what's really interesting is how these two men came from such different backgrounds and still managed to clash on almost every level.
Exactly. You've got Diddy, born in Harlem, raised in Mount Vernon. His father was murdered when he was just a toddler, a fact that shaped his life and his hunger. He climbed the industry ladder fast, interned at Uptown Records, then launching Bad Boy Records. A businessman from the start.
Meanwhile, 50 Cent was born in South Jamaica, Queens, lost his mother at 8, grew up around violence and drugs, started selling by the time he was 12. He wasn't just rapping about the streets, he came directly from them. And when he got into the music game, he didn't play by anyone else's rules.
That's the thing. They're both survivors, but in totally different ways. Diddy played the long game, building brands, climbing corporate ladders, making deals. 50 used aggression and authenticity. He made people listen because he didn't care who he offended.
And that contrast created friction. They weren't just rivals in music. They were rivals in attitude and image and business. Everything Diddy tried to polish, 50 Cent tried to call out. And for years, it was mostly subliminal shots. Industry whispers, little digs in interviews.
But even early on, people could feel it. Like when 50 started talking about the way record labels treated their artists, it wasn't hard to read between the lines. He was pointing straight at Diddy, and he wasn't wrong. Over the years, we've heard a lot about how Diddy handled his artists' contracts.
Right. People like Mace, The Lox, even Danity Kane, they've all made claims about being underpaid or mismanaged. 50 Cent took that narrative and ran with it. He called Diddy a culture vulture more than once, and that didn't sit well.
But what's interesting is that Diddy never really snapped back, at least not publicly. He always seemed to take the "I'm above this" approach. The suits, the mogul image, he'd brush it off in interviews, laugh it off, even say 50 loved him.
Yeah, but let's be honest, that's part of the strategy. By not reacting, Diddy kept his brand clean. But 50 kept poking because that's what he does. He finds the crack in the armor and pushes until it splits.
And now, all these years later, that rivalry is showing up in a courtroom, not over songs, not over brands, but through witness testimony and criminal allegations. This thing went way past hip-hop beef.
Way past. And in part 2, we're going to talk about where it really began to escalate. The diss tracks, the direct accusations, and how 50 Cent took their feud to a whole new level.
Welcome back to the Celebrity Crime File. In part 1, we explored the origins, the personalities, the paths, the quiet tension. But in this part, we're talking about when things went public, when the quiet jabs turned into full-on lyrical warfare. And it starts in 2006.
That year was a turning point. 50 Cent dropped a diss track that lit the fuse. The line that really got people talking: "Who shot Biggie Smalls? If we don't get him, they gonna kill us all." Man, Puffy know who hit that. He wasn't just talking trash, he was pointing fingers at Diddy. That's serious.
And you have to understand how heavy that accusation was. Diddy and Biggie weren't just label mates, they were like brothers. For 50 Cent to even suggest that Diddy knew something about Biggie's death crossed a line most people wouldn't dare approach.
But 50 doesn't do safe. He thrives on confrontation. And even after the track dropped, he kept the pressure on. He hinted at Tupac's murder too, suggesting Diddy may have played a role in that as well. The conspiracy talk started to pick up steam.
He even used social media to stir it up. In 2023, he posted a photo of Suge Knight and Tupac in the car before the shooting, with the caption, "Damn, so Pac got lined by Brother Love? LOL." That's one of Diddy's other names, Brother Love. It was clear who he was targeting.
And it didn't stop there. He'd go on interviews, make Instagram skits, post AI-generated memes, all focused on clowning Diddy. And behind every joke, there was always a hint of something more serious, something darker.
What makes it so unique is how lopsided the interaction was. 50 Cent kept jabbing, and Diddy stayed calm, or pretended to. That Breakfast Club interview from 2018 is a perfect example. When asked about the beef, he laughed it off and said, "He loves me. Y'all can't see that?" That line went viral, but everyone knew this wasn't love. It was sarcasm. And underneath that polished exterior was frustration, maybe even fear. Because by then, 50 Cent's accusations were starting to catch public interest.
It was also about positioning. 50 painted himself as the truth teller, the guy calling out shady business practices, secret deals, alleged crimes, and he often tied it all back to Diddy, especially around artist exploitation.
He brought up former bad boy artists like Mace, who said he never got the money he deserved. The Lox had issues too, and 50 made sure people didn't forget that. He framed Diddy not just as a mogul, but as someone who profited off others unfairly. So now you had the perfect setup. One man taunting from the shadows, the other deflecting in the spotlight. And that tension, it kept building until it exploded in court years later.
In part 3, we'll break down what happened when that feud entered the legal system and how 50 Cent suddenly became part of a federal trial involving racketeering, sex trafficking, and one of the most powerful names in hip-hop.
Once the federal investigation into Diddy started gaining public attention, everything shifted. What had been just music industry drama started to feel like a criminal saga. And 50 Cent, he wasted no time jumping in.
Yeah, when federal agents raided Diddy's Miami mansion, 50 Cent went online immediately. He posted, "Now it's not Diddy do, it's Diddy done." And he wasn't subtle about it. He was enjoying every moment of it, even turning it into promo for his G-Unit brand.
It was more than just trolling. This was someone who clearly saw himself as vindicated. After years of accusing Diddy of shady dealings, here was federal law enforcement confirming that something was seriously wrong.
And then it got even more intense because in court, during actual testimony, 50 Cent's name was brought up by a witness. This wasn't just internet drama anymore. His name was now in the transcripts.
The witness was Capricorn Clark, a former assistant to Diddy who later became the head of marketing for Sean John. She worked with him for over a decade and had some of the most explosive allegations yet.
She said that Diddy had threatened her on more than one occasion, even allegedly kidnapped her in 2011. But what caught everyone's attention was a story about a moment at an MTV event when she, Diddy, and Chris Lighty got into an elevator.
According to Clark, after the event, Diddy looked at Lighty, who, by the way, was managing 50 Cent at the time, and said, "I don't like all this back and forth. I like guns." It was clearly a veiled threat directed at 50.
That quote is chilling, especially coming from someone who was in such a powerful position. And coming from Clark, who had been close to him for years, it didn't sound like exaggeration. She testified that he was dead serious when he said it.
It painted a very different picture of Diddy. Not just a flashy businessman or artist, but someone who used intimidation, maybe even violence, to control people. And in that moment, 50 Cent wasn't just a music rival. He was a target.
And of course, 50 reacted in his usual way. Humor, mockery, and posts. He started posting AI-generated images of himself looking terrified, pretending he was being hunted by itty-bitty Diddy. But underneath the jokes, there was real tension.
Once the trial picked up speed, the testimony started coming in fast, and they were disturbing. Former employees, assistants, bodyguards, all describing a toxic, high-pressure environment. And at the center of it all, Diddy.
One recurring theme was fear. People weren't just quitting jobs. They were saying they were afraid to leave, that they felt trapped. Threats weren't just about being fired. They were about being ruined, blackballed, or even physically harmed.
And it wasn't limited to assistants or entry-level folks. Some of these people were high up, people who had been close to Diddy for years. When Capricorn Clark said she was taken to Central Park at night by his security team and threatened, that wasn't a rumor. That was under oath.
Then you've got people like George Kaplan, who testified that he regularly worked 20-hour days. He said if you slept, you risked being fired. That kind of environment doesn't just show bad leadership. It starts sounding like forced labor.
It's interesting because we used to see it on shows like Making the Band. Remember that? People walking to Brooklyn for cheesecake. At the time, it looked like reality TV entertainment. But now, through the lens of this trial, it feels a lot darker.
That's what's so eerie. A lot of things that once seemed like quirky Diddy behavior now look more like signs of control, power abuse, even psychological manipulation. And the prosecution seems to be using those stories to show a consistent pattern.
What stood out to me was how many witnesses used similar language. They weren't just overworked, they were afraid. Afraid of being smeared, of never working in the industry again. That's how Diddy's influence worked. Not just fame, fear.
At the defense, they've been trying to poke holes in memory, small inconsistencies, like what someone was wearing, what year something happened. But none of that takes away from the larger story that's being painted.
It's like the finer details are fuzzy, but the experience, the trauma, the pattern, that's crystal clear. And once someone like 50 Cent enters that pattern, the threat becomes personal. Not just public beef, but real danger.
And 50's response, even if sarcastic, seems to acknowledge that. He's mocking it, sure, but he's also keeping it in the spotlight. Every joke reminds the public this isn't just entertainment. It's a trial with real consequences.
Now that we're deep into the trial, the picture that's being painted is bigger than just one man. It's not just about what Diddy did or didn't do. It's about the kind of power he held and how he used it.
Absolutely. You look at someone like Diddy, who built himself up to be a symbol of success. Music, fashion, liquor, TV. He was everywhere. But now we're seeing the machinery behind that empire. And it doesn't look so clean.
One moment that stuck with me was when George Kaplan, after describing horrific work conditions, still called Diddy a god among men. It's almost like people around him were conditioned to admire him, even while being mistreated.
That's the scary part. When someone's power is so massive, so intimidating, it creates a bubble. People are afraid to leave, afraid to speak. And when they do, it's only after years of silence, like what we're seeing in this courtroom now.
The prosecution has focused heavily on that idea that Diddy didn't just run a company. He ran what they describe as a criminal enterprise, using money, threats, and influence to control the people around him, especially women.
And they're connecting that to racketeering, saying this isn't just about abuse or bad behavior, it's about systematic exploitation. Sex trafficking, forced labor, transportation for prostitution, heavy charges that could mean serious prison time.
What's remarkable is how this case has dragged so many celebrity names into the conversation. Usher, Cassie, Neo, even Kid Cudi. Not because they're defendants, but because they were close to the chaos, close enough to see something.
And while all this is happening, 50 Cent hasn't backed down. If anything, he's amped it up, posting memes, taunting online, even planning a documentary that purportedly will donate profits to survivors of abuse. He's turned trolling into a mission.
It's complicated though. On one hand, he's trolling. On the other hand, he's forcing people to keep paying attention. In a weird way, 50 Cent is using his platform to hold Diddy accountable, even if it's through sarcasm and social media.
At the end of the day, this trial will be about more than guilt or innocence. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked for too long, and what happens when people finally start talking.
Thanks for tuning in to Celebrity Crime File. However this ends, one thing's for sure. Hit Cop will never look at this rivalry the same way again.
We'll catch you next time. Stay curious, stay sharp, and maybe think twice before beefing with a billionaire.